My daughter called me and said she saw her mother leave with her lover for the work party. The heart raced in the chest, the air became heavy, and a lump formed in the throat. It couldn't be true. Not after so many years, after everything we built together. She always arrived late, saying there were endless meetings, tight deadlines, demands from management. I believed. Like a fool, I always believed. But now, hearing this from my daughter, her voice shaking with disappointment, made my world fall apart. The body moved on its own as he took the car keys and ran like crazy through the city streets. The image of her, laughing, dancing with another man, flashed through my head and made my blood boil. I didn't want to believe it, but at the same time, I knew I needed to see it with my own eyes. Who knows, maybe it was just a misunderstanding, a coworker, a joke. But my daughter's voice echoed in my mind. "Daddy, I saw Mommy leave with her lover." The weight of those words crushed me. I parked the car near the event hall. Colorful lights flashed, loud music vibrated on the asphalt. Well-dressed people came and went, smiles on their faces, lively conversations. For them, it was just another party. For me, it was the beginning of hell. I walked in, eyes scanning every corner. I didn't know exactly what I expected to find, but something inside me screamed that I was about to see something that would change everything forever. And then, there she was. My wife. The woman with whom I shared my entire life. In another man's arms. Their bodies pressed together, his hands sliding around her waist as if it were conquered territory. She smiled, threw her hair back, looked at him with a sparkle in her eyes that I hadn't seen in years. A look that should be mine. Betrayal burned like a hot blade through my chest. Instincts took over. I took my cell phone out of my pocket and started taking photos. 1 click. 2. 3. I wanted to have proof. Not just for me, but so she could never deny what she did. But as my fingers pressed the button, something happened. A sudden silence fell in the hall. Heads turned. A murmur spread among the guests. The door opened with a bang. A woman entered. Her gaze swept the room until it stopped at the scene I was recording with the camera. My wife's lover froze. Her expression dissolved into pure terror. The silence was broken by the woman's voice, which cut through the air like a whip. "So this is where you are," she said, her face contorted in fury. The entire room turned to her. My wife's lover took a step back, tried to say something, but the words died in his throat. She charged forward, eyes burning. "You said you were going to work late. That you were exhausted. That you loved me. And now I find you here, hugging this married woman." My wife's eyes widened. The crowd murmured, whispers spread like fire through dry straw. "Wait, it's not what it looks like," my wife began, but the woman laughed. "It's not what it seems. I have messages, calls, I followed you, you bastard. What now? Are you going to deny it?" The lover turned to my wife. "You said your husband wouldn't find out. That this was our secret." The woman let out a bitter laugh. "Our secret? What else did you lie to me about?" Chaos was established. My wife, who moments before had been so confident, so entrusted in that man's arms, was now pale, her mouth opening and closing without being able to find words. Shock spread among the guests. Some looked with amazement, others with disgust. And then, a voice emerged from the crowd. "That's no surprise. Everyone knew these two were having an affair." My wife's face fell apart. Her lover, seeing that he was trapped, tried to get out, but his wife held his arm. "Do you think you can just leave? Without assuming anything? Without even looking me in the eye?" The shame became an unbearable weight. My wife looked around, looking for an escape. I remained there, motionless, letting the scene unfold before my eyes. Her humiliation was public, and for a second, I felt a bitter taste of justice. But that wasn't enough. I took a deep breath, raised the camera again and, with all the calm in the world, took another photo. The image of her, terrified, surrounded by judgmental looks, would be the last memory I would have of that woman I once called my wife. There was nothing left to be said. I turned my back and left the room. But this story doesn't end here. Because after that night, my life took an unexpected turn. And destiny had something in store for me. Something I could never have predicted. Welcome to the channel. Here, we do not support and never romanticize betrayal. The stories you will hear are fictional, but they carry a cruel truth: infidelity destroys lives, corrodes relationships and leaves irreversible marks. Our goal is to show the devastating impact of disloyalty and the inevitable consequences it brings. Get ready for a story shocking, intense, and full of twists and turns. Take a deep breath, because what's next will mess with you. Michael always believed that marriage was an unbreakable pact, a promise made not just before an altar, but in front of life. From the first moment he met Emma, he knew she was the woman he wanted to grow old with. He remembered the way she smiled when she heard his lame jokes, the way she lightly bit her lip when she was concentrating, and the warmth he felt in his chest every time he saw her walk through the door after a long day. It was a connection that seemed impossible to break, something solid, reliable, like the roots of a tree that intertwine with the ground. They had met more than 15 years ago, when they were both at different stages in life, but the passion was instantaneous. She was a determined, sweet-spoken but sharp-minded woman who knew exactly what she wanted. He is a man of simple values, a hard worker, always seeking to build a secure base for his family. Time passed and that burning passion of youth transformed into something deeper, a partnership that went beyond romantic gestures. Michael and Emma built a life together that, to others, seemed impeccable. They had a wonderful daughter, Sophie, just 9 years old, who was the light of their days. The girl had her mother's eyes and her father's calmness, a child who grew up surrounded by love and protection. Their home was a reflection of the life they built, a comfortable house, full of photos spread across the walls, each one telling a piece of the story they lived. The routine, despite being predictable, brought security. Breakfast was always rushed, between Emma's meetings and Michael's deadlines, but there was something special about the evenings. This was when they would gather around the table, share stories and laugh about the little things of the day. Emma worked in a large company, a position of respect earned over the years with a lot of effort and dedication. She had always been ambitious, always wanted more, and Michael admired that about her. But at the same time, he couldn't ignore the fact that over the past few months, something had felt different. The conversations between the two had changed tone, the exchanges of affection were less frequent, the kisses became quick and mechanical, and the touches seemed merely protocolary. He tried not to think about it too much. Marriage had phases, it always has. It wasn't the first time they had faced a warm phase, and he believed that everything would soon return to normal. But deep down, there was an uneasiness slowly growing within him, a silent discomfort that refused to be ignored. Michael was always a rational man, someone who avoided creating unnecessary paranoia. He was proud of his patience, the way he always knew how to give Emma space to be who she wanted to be. But now, as he looked at her sitting on the couch, distracted by her cell phone, laughing at something he had no idea what it was, he felt a strange tightness in his chest. She no longer shared the little things with him, the banal moments that were once part of the relationship. The messages on the phone that made her smile, the frequent trips to work events that didn't exist before, the different perfumes he noticed on her clothes at the end of the day. Small things, perhaps insignificant, but together they formed a mosaic of doubts that he didn't want to see completely. The truth is that Michael was never afraid of losing Emma. There was never room for insecurities because he believed the love they built was strong enough to withstand anything. But what if it was wrong? What if, as he fought to keep the family foundation intact, some crack had gone unnoticed? He tried to push those thoughts away, to focus on work, on Sophie, on everyday commitments, but the uncertainty was there, like a silent shadow that followed him wherever he went. That night, as they lay side by side, Michael tried to pull Emma close, as he did every night. But she walked away slightly, saying she was tired. It wasn't the first time. He didn't insist, he just turned to the other side and stood there, looking at the ceiling, listening to the sound of the wind hitting the window. Something inside him was different. A feeling that something was about to happen, something that would change everything. He just didn't know what. But soon he would find out. The days passed without Michael being able to get rid of that nagging feeling that something was wrong. He tried to ignore it, to focus on the routine, but there was an invisible weight between him and Emma, something he couldn't name, but that he felt with every averted glance, with every touch that didn't happen, with every vague excuse to avoid closeness. Sophie, oblivious to any problems, continued to be the connecting link between them, the reason for family dinners, forced laughter, moments when they pretended to be the same as before. But Sophie had only to leave the room for a dense silence to ensue. Emma was increasingly distant, always with her phone in her hands, always distracted, always too busy. Work meetings, which previously took place sporadically, were now almost daily. She arrived late, avoided long conversations, and when he asked something more direct, he received short, often irritated answers, as if he were invading a space that no longer belonged to him. Michael tried to believe it was just stress, that it was just a phase. But there was an uneasiness growing inside him, a restlessness that made him observe every little detail more closely. One night, as she slept next to him, Michael stared at the ceiling, feeling the weight of emptiness between them. He turned around, observing her serene face, her hair spread out on the pillow. That was the same face he fell in love with years ago, the same face he used to look at with admiration and desire. But now, there was something different, something he could no longer ignore. He picked up her phone that was on the dresser, hesitated for a moment, feeling a tightness in his chest, but in the end he gave in. He unlocked the screen with Emma's fingerprint while his heart beat wildly. The messages were there. Some archived, others deleted, but enough for him to understand what was happening. Conversations that went on for days, messages deleted in the middle of the dialogue, short and cold answers for him, while for someone else there were words full of enthusiasm. He scrolled slowly, feeling his stomach drop with each sentence. The name didn't matter. What mattered was the tone. The kind of conversation he and Emma hadn't had in a long time. Michael felt short of breath. He swallowed hard, put the cell phone back in its place, and stood there, staring into space. He felt a mixture of anger, pain and disbelief. There was no concrete proof yet, but he knew what it meant. He knew Emma well enough to understand that that kind of conversation only happened when there was something deeper involved. But he needed to see it for himself, he needed to be sure before confronting her. Over the next few days, Michael began to observe more closely. Every detail, every exit, every smile she gave to the phone. I analyzed schedules, excuses, mood changes. He began to notice patterns. She noticed that on Fridays, Emma was more dressed up than usual for meetings that always went on until late. She noticed that weekends were filled with last-minute commitments that she never really explained. He noticed that her perfume changed on certain days, that there was a different shine in her eyes when she came home. It was on one of these Fridays that he decided to act. He waited for Emma to leave for the supposed work event and, instead of accepting her excuses as he always did, he decided to follow his instincts. He called his daughter and said he would be gone for a few hours, but would be back before she fell asleep. He took the car and drove through the streets as if he were on autopilot. The destination was already clear in his mind. He parked a safe distance from where Emma's company party was taking place. The lights were shining, loud music was escaping through the half-open doors. Michael felt his heart pound in his chest, but he couldn't back away any longer. He walked slowly to the entrance, mingling with the people arriving and leaving. He had never felt so out of place. His eyes swept the room, seeking confirmation for what he already knew. And then, he saw her. Emma was there, in the center of the room, dancing with another man. Their bodies too close, his hands on her waist, their eyes exchanging looks filled with something Michael hadn't seen in a long time. Her laugh wasn't the same as the one she had at home. It was a laugh full of life, of desire. As if everything she was feeling was new, exciting. As if Michael didn't exist. He felt his stomach sink. It was real. It was true. The man pulled her closer, murmured something in her ear, and Emma smiled, tilting her head slightly, accepting the closeness without hesitation. Michael clenched his fists, feeling heat rise through his body, a mixture of pain and anger that he had never experienced before. He wanted to move forward, he wanted to scream, he wanted to do something. But he stood there, watching as the woman he loved gave herself to another man as if he had never existed. He took out his cell phone. Took photos. 1, 2, 3. I needed proof. He needed to see it later to convince himself it wasn't a nightmare. It was then that something unexpected happened. The door to the hall suddenly opened, and a woman entered, her eyes blazing with fury. The entire hall seemed to hold its breath for a moment. Emma turned around when she heard the sound of heels clicking against the floor, and her expression instantly changed. Her lover froze. The woman walked towards them, her gaze fixed on the man Emma was with. And then, the truth exploded in the room like a bomb. The hall fell silent, as if time itself had stopped to watch what was about to happen. The woman who had entered was staring at the man who was dancing with Emma. Her eyes held a seething anger, an almost palpable hatred, a pain that didn't need to be expressed in words to be understood. Michael stood still, watching everything as if he were watching a scene that didn't belong to him, but every detail was a direct blow to the chest. The woman walked with firm steps, crossing the room like a hurricane ready to destroy everything in its path. Emma, seeing her approach, instinctively backed away, as if she knew something terrible was about to happen. The lover, on the other hand, stood paralyzed, like a man who had just been discovered in a crime he swore would never be revealed. The silence was broken by the woman's sharp voice. So this is where you are. Is that why you left the house in such a hurry today? To be rubbing shoulders with a married woman while I was at home believing your every word? The lover tried to speak, but the woman raised her hand, interrupting any excuse he could come up with. The entire hall was alert, eyes turning to the scene as if no one wanted to miss a single detail of the unfolding disaster. Emma looked at him, waiting for him to say something, anything that would get her out of this situation. But the only thing he did was avert his eyes, as if he were trying to escape a trap he knew he couldn't escape. The woman turned to Emma, her gaze full of contempt. Do you even know who he is? Or do you just accept any man who whispers some sweet nothings in your ear? Emma didn't respond right away. His eyes blinked rapidly, trying to process the situation, trying to find a way out of something that was already completely out of control. This has nothing to do with you, she tried to say, but the woman laughed, a bitter laugh full of despair. It has nothing to do with me. Do you really think so? The woman took a step forward, staring at Emma with growing fury. You destroyed my marriage, you destroyed my life, and now you tell me you have nothing to do with me. Do you even know what he did? Emma looked at her lover, looking for answers, but he didn't say anything. His silence was worse than any confession. Michael felt his heart hammering in his chest. He didn't know what was about to be revealed, but something inside him told him this was much bigger than just an ordinary betrayal. The woman took a deep breath, trying to contain the voice that threatened to break amidst the whirlwind of emotions. This man who is by your side, who you let destroy your family, he is a scammer. He's been doing this for years. He reaches out to married women, to women who think they've found something new, something exciting, something their husbands can no longer offer. He promises love, adventure, and then disappears, taking everything he can. The hall became even quieter. Everyone seemed to be absorbing those words as if they were a slowly burning poison. Emma looked at her lover, her expression began to change from confusion to shock. "That's not true," she whispered, but there was uncertainty in her voice. The woman snorted, taking her phone out of her pocket and pressing a few buttons with trembling fingers. "Isn't that true? So explain this to me." She lifted her cell phone and showed something to Emma. The color drained from her face. Michael, even from where he was able to see a series of photos, messages, and emails. An entire dossier that made it clear that this man was not just a traitor, but someone who made betrayal a business. "You're not the only one," the woman continued, her voice now broken with pain. "He's already done this to several others before you. He chooses vulnerable women, women he knows are unhappy in their marriages, women who want to feel something new. And then, he takes what he can from them and disappears. He took money from me. He took money from others. He took dignity, took time, took pieces of the soul of each one who believed in his promises." Emma put her hands on her face, as if she wanted to hide from it all. But the truth was there, exposed for all to see. The man beside her was not just a lover. He was a predator. Michael felt something inside him twist. The anger he felt towards Emma was now mixed with something deeper. Pity? No, it wasn't pity. It was a confusing feeling, as if the woman he knew had completely disappeared. As if he were looking at a stranger, someone who had fallen into a trap she helped create. The lover looked around, realizing there was no way out. The surrounding audience whispered, some looked at him with disgust, others with pure contempt. He opened his mouth to speak, but couldn't find the right words. The woman took a step forward and, before anyone could react, raised her hand and slapped him across the face. The crack echoed throughout the hall. "This is for all the women you deceived," she said, her voice filled with undeniable hatred. He staggered back slightly, clutching his face, but didn't fight back. He just lowered his head. He knew it was over. Emma, on the other hand, looked lost. She looked at Michael, perhaps hoping to find some semblance of support, some shadow of understanding. But all he saw was an empty look, a look that said everything without needing words. Michael turned slowly, putting his cell phone in his pocket, and began walking out of the room. He didn't need to hear anything anymore. I didn't need any more explanations, no more excuses. The betrayal was devastating in itself. But knowing that Emma had given herself to someone like that man, that made everything even worse. He left the hall and took a deep breath of the cold night air. The pain was still there, strong, overwhelming. But there was something different now. He knew this wasn't the end. It was just the beginning of something new. And this time, he wouldn't look back. The cold night air felt thicker, pressing down on Michael's chest as he slowly walked away from the room. The steps were heavy, as if each one carried the weight of everything that had just happened. Emma's face, pale and speechless, continued to burn in his mind. Her eyes were filled with something he didn't know if it was regret, despair, or simply shock at the fact that everything had been laid out like that. But none of that mattered anymore. He had seen everything with his own eyes, there was no room for doubt. The marriage he had built with so much effort, which he once believed to be unshakable, was now destroyed, scattered across the floor like shards of glass that were impossible to put back together. He got into the car and remained motionless, his hands on the steering wheel, his eyes fixed on nothing. His stomach felt like an empty pit, a black hole that sucked in everything he felt. There was no anger then, not anymore. Just an overwhelming exhaustion, a tiredness that was not just physical, but emotional, mental. It was as if his very identity was being undone before his eyes. Who was he now? A betrayed man? An abandoned husband? A father trying to maintain his sanity so as not to destroy the only thing that still made sense in his life, his daughter. He drove aimlessly for a while, his thoughts confused, the night stretching out before him like an absolute void. The city lights went unnoticed, the headlights reflected on the car glass, but nothing seemed real. Everything he knew, had changed in a matter of minutes. Their marriage no longer existed. But the pain was still there, clinging to him like a shadow that couldn't be left behind. When he finally parked in front of the house, he stayed there for a few moments before getting out of the car. Every step to the door was a reminder of the life he still had to face, the difficult conversations to come, the way everything would fall apart in front of Sophie. She didn't deserve this. She didn't deserve to see her parents destroy everything that was once built. But it was impossible to protect someone from a truth like that. Upon entering, the house was silent. The low lights cast soft shadows across the walls, a cruel contrast to the chaos happening inside. She sat on the couch, burying her face in her hands, breathing deeply in a futile attempt to find some clarity. But his mind was in a whirlwind. I didn't know what I would do, how I would react when Emma finally arrived, how I would explain this to Sophie. He wasn't the kind of man who exploded, who screamed, who broke things. He was always rational, always tried to solve problems calmly. But how do you solve a problem when love itself has been ripped out of your hands? Time passed slowly, and when he heard the sound of the door opening, he knew the confrontation was inevitable. Emma entered hesitantly, her eyes red, her breathing ragged. She looked fragile, small, as if she expected him to attack her, to condemn her right then and there. But all Michael did was look up, his expression hard, unbreakable. There was nothing more to say, because she knew exactly what she had done. She tried to speak, but her voice was weak, shaky, without strength. Michael. He raised his hand, stopping her. You don't need to say anything. I saw everything. Emma closed her eyes for a moment, as if the confirmation of that made the pain even more real. I don't know what to say, she whispered. Michael let out a bitter, humorless laugh. Then don't say anything. Words don't change what happened. She walked a few steps to the center of the room, as if trying to find some semblance of familiarity, some way to hold on to the life she herself destroyed. I never wanted it to happen like this. Her voice was a thread of regret, but there were no tears, there were no pleas. But it happened, Michael replied, his voice firm, cold. And now there is no going back. Emma finally looked up at him, and for the first time that night, Michael saw something different in her eyes. Fear. Not the fear of losing the marriage, but the fear of what would come after. The fear of what he would do now that he knew the truth. I need to explain. Michael shook his head in disbelief. Explain what? That you cheated on your husband with a scammer? That you were just another one on his list? Or that you would have continued if you hadn't been caught? Emma opened her mouth but found no response. I trusted you, Emma. I spent years believing we were partners. That no matter what happened, we would always be together. And now I look at you and see nothing but a stranger. She took a step forward, but he stepped back, and it was like a physical blow to her. And Sophie? How are we going to tell her this? How do you intend to look at our daughter and explain that you destroyed her family? Emma swallowed hard, guilt finally becoming something visible on her face. I never wanted to hurt you. Michael closed his eyes for a moment, trying to contain the weight of those words. But it hurt. And now you need to deal with it. The silence between the two stretched out, filled with everything that could no longer be said. Michael knew that this was their last night as husband and wife. There were no more doubts. There was no more room for second chances. Something inside him had been broken, and no matter how hard he tried, he knew he could never mend it. Emma was alone now. Alone with her choices, with their consequences. And him? He had something she would never have again. The chance to start over. The house was plunged into an almost suffocating silence. Emma remained motionless in the middle of the room, her expression desolate, as if she was still trying to understand what was left there, if there was any way to repair what had been shattered. Michael, on the other hand, felt as if the ground beneath his feet was just a distant echo, as if everything around him was a projection of something that no longer existed. Emma's face, her presence, her hesitant voice, nothing else affected him the way it should. It was strange to realize that an entire relationship could fall apart in such a short period of time, as if the years of living together were nothing more than a house of cards ready to collapse at the slightest whiff of reality. Michael sighed deeply, running a hand over his tired face. He needed to get out of there, breathe air that wasn't permeated with the smell of a failed marriage. Without looking at Emma, he walked to the door. "Where are you going?" Her voice was low, weak, as if she feared the answer. He stopped, but didn't turn around. "I don't know. But I need to get out of here." Emma took a few steps forward, as if she wanted to stop him, but hesitated. Michael finally looked at her, and his expression was sharp. "Do you want me to stay?" "For what?" "To hear more excuses. To hear you say it was a mistake, that you regret it, that you want to fix everything. Because I can't listen to this anymore." Emma looked away, clutching her arms to her body as if she needed to hold herself back from collapsing right there. "I don't know what to say, Michael." He let out a dry, humorless laugh. "Then don't say anything." And he left, closing the door behind him. Outside, the cold night air enveloped him but brought no relief. The house, which was once the symbol of everything he built, now seemed just a reminder of a past he wanted to forget. He walked aimlessly through the deserted streets, not knowing exactly where to go. His mind was in chaos, his feelings were still racing inside him. He wanted to scream, break something, release his pent-up fury. But what would that change? Nothing. The damage was already done. It was only when he realized he had walked to a small bar in the city center that he realized how lost he was. He thought about going in, ordering a drink strong enough to numb his mind, but he hesitated. Drowning yourself in alcohol wouldn't solve anything. His life would still be there when the hangover passed. He sat on a nearby park bench, watching the distant lights of the city. Everything seemed to go on normally, as if the world hadn't been destroyed along with him. It didn't take long to feel your cell phone vibrate in your pocket. I didn't need to see who it was to know. Ignored the call. Minutes later, a message appeared on the screen. "Emma, we need to talk. Please tell me where you are." Michael locked the screen and put his phone back in his pocket. He didn't want to talk. What else was there to say? He already knew everything. "I knew that Emma had made her choice long before all this came to light. It wasn't an impulsive mistake, it wasn't a moment's slip. It was something she nurtured, something she allowed to grow, and now that everything was falling apart, she wanted to find a way to minimize the damage. But there was no way to fix something that was already broken." Dawn advanced slowly, and Michael finally stood up, feeling the weight of fatigue accumulate in every muscle in his body. He walked home, knowing that no matter what came next, nothing would be the same again. When he arrived, he found Emma still awake, sitting on the sofa, her hands clasped in her lap, her gaze lost on the floor. When she saw him enter, she looked up quickly, her expression filled with silent expectation, as if she expected him to say something, anything. But Michael just walked to the kitchen, grabbed a glass of water, and drank it in silence. "Do you intend to ignore me forever?" Her voice cut through the room. He placed the glass on the sink, closed his eyes for a moment, and then turned to face her. "No, Emma. But I also don't know how to look at you now." She stood up, crossing her arms, as if trying to find the strength to face this conversation. "I know I made a mistake. I know there are no excuses for what I did. But... Michael raised an eyebrow in disbelief. "I just wanted you to listen to me." He laughed, a low sound without any trace of amusement. "Listen to what? You've lied enough." Emma ran her tongue over her dry lips, taking a deep breath before speaking. I never wanted to hurt you, Michael. But it hurt. And that's all that matters. She looked away, tears pooling in her eyes. I loved you, Michael. I still love you. He felt a bitter taste in his mouth upon hearing those words. No. You loved the idea of what we had. But real love doesn't do that. Real love doesn't destroy someone like that. Emma quickly wiped away her tears, but her body was shaking. What will happen now? Michael ran a hand through his hair, exhausted. Now I'm going to sleep. And tomorrow I'll think about the rest. Emma nodded slowly, as if expecting something worse. Do you want me to leave? He stared at her for a long moment before responding. I still don't know what I want. And with that, he turned and went up the stairs, leaving her alone in the room, wrapped in the weight of her own choices. The silence in the house was oppressive. Every wall seemed to tell a story that now belonged to the past, every piece of furniture was a reminder of a life that would never be the same. Emma remained there, lost in thought, feeling the emptiness expand around her. Michael, upstairs, sat on the edge of the bed, looking at the empty side where Emma used to sleep. The pain was still there, pulsing, but something inside him was beginning to transform. Maybe it was the start of something new. Maybe it was just the end of something that should have ended a long time ago. He still didn't know which path he would take. But one thing was certain, he would never look back. Morning came like a crushing weight on Michael. The soft light of dawn filtered through the curtains, but it brought no sense of renewal. His body was exhausted, but his mind did not allow him to rest even for an instant. He spent the night staring at the ceiling, listening to the silence around him, feeling the invisible presence of what was left of his marriage hovering over him like a ghost. When he went downstairs, he found Emma sitting on the sofa, her eyes fixed on some distant point, holding a cup of cold coffee in her hands. Her face was pale, the deep circles under her eyes revealed that she hadn't slept either. But, unlike him, she seemed resigned, like someone who already accepted the weight of the consequences of her actions. Michael stopped in the middle of the room, keeping a safe distance, as if proximity could rekindle something that was already dead. Emma looked up slowly, searching for some response on his face, but found only indifference. Have you decided what you are going to do? Her voice was weak, but blunt. Michael took a deep breath, crossing his arms over his chest. I'll move on. Those words hung between them for a few seconds, and it was as if the impact of them finally sunk inside her. Emma lowered her head, tightening her fingers around the cup as if it was the only thing holding it in place. Are you going to hate me forever? Michael closed his eyes for a moment, as if searching within himself for an answer that wasn't guided by anger or resentment. I don't hate you, Emma. Hatred would require that I still feel something for you. But I don't feel it anymore. She blinked quickly, looking away so he wouldn't see the wet glow that was beginning to form there. And Sophie? How are we going to tell her? Michael ran a hand through his hair, exhausted. I don't want her to know the details. She's a child, she doesn't deserve to carry this weight. Let's just say that we are no longer happy together and have decided to separate. Emma nodded slowly, her voice cracking a little. That means, yes, he cut in, without hesitation. I'm going to file for divorce. Emma closed her eyes, biting her lip to contain the pain. She knew it was inevitable, she knew there was nothing more she could do to stop it, but hearing the final sentence made everything seem even more real. The rest of the day passed in a state of dormancy. Emma packed some bags and decided to spend a few days at her parents' house while everything was sorted out. Sophie was spared the details, but the sadness in her eyes when she saw her parents separating was enough for Michael to feel a new stab in the chest. Emma's betrayal had destroyed more than just a marriage. He had ripped away a piece of their lives that could never be restored. The following weeks were a blur of signed documents, meetings with lawyers, decisions about the division of assets. Michael threw himself into his work to avoid thinking too much, to avoid drowning in everything that had happened. But the pain was there, always lurking, waiting for the right moment to swallow everything around it. Emma tried to rebuild her life, but nothing was as she imagined. Shame followed her wherever she went. People whispered behind her back, judgmental gazes surrounded her everywhere. Her own parents, who always supported her in everything, could not hide their disappointment. Her lover, the man she threw everything away for, disappeared without a trace as soon as he realized he could no longer take anything from her. And there she was, alone, staring at the emptiness she created around her. Michael, on the other hand, found his way out of his pain in something unexpected. In the midst of that chaos, he met someone. It wasn't a sudden romance, nor something that tried to replace what he lost. But, little by little, he found a genuine companion, someone who wasn't there to lie, deceive, or hide secrets. Someone who, unlike Emma, didn't make him question his own worth. The day she signed the divorce papers was the day she finally felt like she was free. It wasn't immediate relief, it wasn't happiness, but it was a step towards something new, something that wasn't tied to the weight of betrayal. He looked at Emma for the last time in that lawyer's office, and what he saw was just a woman he no longer recognized. The love that once existed between them dissolved into bitter memories. Emma left the room without saying a word. There was nothing more to be said. Michael took a deep breath, took the signed papers and walked out into a life that, for the first time in a long time, belonged only to him. Fate had taken its toll. But he was ready to start over. And now, I want to know your opinion on this story. What did you think of the ending? Do you think Michael did the right thing by moving on? Leave your comment, I want to know your view on this betrayal and its consequences. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel to follow more shocking stories like this. And remember, here we do not support any type of betrayal. Until next time.